What if the person sitting next to you at a laundromat could become your worst nightmare in seconds? In the summer of 1975, that nightmare became terrifyingly real for one young woman, and her courage would ultimately expose one of America's most brutal serial killers.
Richard Otto Macek wasn't born a monster.
Born in Chicago in 1948, he seemed destined for an ordinary life in McHenry, Illinois. But beneath that facade lurked something deeply broken, a darkness that would eventually earn him one of the most disturbing nicknames in criminal history, the Mad Biter. His childhood appeared unremarkable on the surface. He attended school, lived with his family, and by all accounts seemed like just another kid growing up in Middle America. But the first cracks in his mask appeared early.
After completing 11th grade, Richard enlisted in the United States Army, perhaps seeking structure or purpose.
Instead, he lasted a mere 6 months before receiving a dishonorable discharge. The reason? He couldn't adjust to the Army. That inability to conform to rules and authority would become a recurring theme, a red flag that, in hindsight, signaled something far more sinister brewing beneath the surface.
From 1968 onward, Richard's rap sheet began growing like a cancer. Peeping Tom charges, aggravated battery, even an attempted murder charge against a woman in Elmwood Park. Between arrests, he bounced between jobs: truck driver, machinist, cook, never quite fitting in anywhere. He married, had children, and worked at a factory in Union. To neighbors and co-workers, he was just another guy trying to make ends meet. But on August 21, 1973, an incident occurred that revealed the cold indifference lurking inside him. While driving for work in McHenry, Richard came around a curve and spotted two teenage girls, 14-year-old Catherine Bell and 13-year-old Kimberly Quinn, walking in the road. He braked and swerved left, but the girls moved in the same direction. His car struck them both. Richard got out and asked if they were okay. The terrified girls, too frightened to tell the truth, said they were fine. And Richard? He simply drove away, leaving two injured children standing on the roadside. Quinn's mother later found them and rushed both girls to the hospital for treatment. When police tracked Richard down, he received nothing more than tickets for failure to render assistance and failure to report a collision involving injury.
That callous act, hitting two children with his car and abandoning them, showcased a chilling absence of empathy that would only intensify. The real horror began on a summer afternoon in 1974. August 13, 1974, started as an ordinary day at the Abbey Resort in Fontana, Wisconsin, a picturesque lakeside hotel where guests came to relax and unwind. 24-year-old Paula Atkinson Cupid was working her shift as a maid, moving from room to room, changing linens and tidying up. But when a colleague noticed Paula had been missing for several hours, concern turned to alarm. The search led to room 606. There, on the floor beneath two blankets, they found Paula's body. The scene was nightmarish. She had been sexually assaulted, stabbed directly in the heart, and strangled with such brutal force that her neck had been broken. The time of death was estimated between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, just hours before her discovery. The Abbey Resort immediately offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to the killer's capture. Sheriff William Cummings assembled 12 detectives to work the case full-time and even brought in an FBI psychoanalyst to create a psychological profile. They determined the killer had locked the door after murdering Paula, using keys he'd stolen from her body. Both Paula's husband and a guest who'd previously rented the room were cleared as suspects. But the trail went cold. Less than a month later, on September 9, another family would be shattered. Firefighters responded to a blaze at 210 Elmhurst Road in Crystal Lake, Illinois. When they extinguished the flames and entered the apartment, they discovered a scene of unspeakable horror. 27-year-old Nancy Lossman lay dead, completely naked with a cord wrapped tightly around her neck. In the bathroom, they found her 3-year-old daughter, Lisa, partially clothed with her head forced into the toilet bowl, a bra tied around her tiny neck, and a towel covering her face. The only survivor was 6-year-old Robert Lossman, who'd been asleep in his closed bedroom during the attack. He was treated for smoke inhalation, but could provide no information about what had happened to his mother and his little sister. During the autopsy, examiners noticed something particularly disturbing: multiple bite marks on Nancy's breast, clearly left by her attacker. While investigators couldn't immediately identify the killer from this evidence, they carefully preserved it, sensing it might prove crucial later. 2 brutal murders, 2 crime scenes marked by extreme violence, and a killer is still walking free.
For nearly a year, Richard continued his reign of terror, undetected and undeterred. Then came the morning of July 26, 1975, the day his luck finally ran out. Sharon Lee Kulisek, a 20-year-old woman, was doing her laundry at the Clothes Hamper self-service laundry in Woodstock, Illinois, in the early morning hours. She noticed a man watching her, Richard searching for his next victim. Something about him felt wrong, deeply wrong, and Sharon made a decision that would save her life and ultimately bring a serial killer to justice. She called the police. But Richard wasn't about to let his prey escape. Before help could arrive, he attacked, beating Sharon viciously over the head again and again. Yet even as blood poured from her wounds, Sharon fought back with everything she had. More remarkably, she managed to keep the phone line open, leaving it off the hook so police could hear what was happening. 2 minutes later, 2 minutes that must have felt like an eternity, officers burst through the door. They found the telephone dangling and followed a trail of blood to a rear corner of the building, where Sharon lay gravely injured. Richard was quickly apprehended nearby.
Sharon was rushed to Rockford Memorial Hospital with severe injuries, including temporary blindness in both eyes. But she would survive, and her bravery, both in calling for help and fighting back, had finally stopped a monster.
Richard was held on $200,000 bail for attempted murder and aggravated battery. He pleaded not guilty, and his public defender requested a psychiatric evaluation. While awaiting trial, Richard was allowed to stay at his mother's home in McHenry under supervision. Then, just before his trial date arrived, Richard vanished.
He had fled to California, becoming a fugitive from justice. But his freedom was short-lived. Less than a month later, authorities tracked him down in San Bernardino and took him into custody. His bond was set at $500,000.
As police dug deeper into Richard's background, pieces of a horrifying puzzle began falling into place. While he was initially set to be extradited back to Illinois for Sharon Kulisek's attempted murder, investigators in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin discovered he was also wanted for a sexual assault at a Holiday Inn that had occurred on October 14, 1974. They'd matched him through his modus operandi and previous mugshots. Around the same time, detectives George Hendel and Louis Tomaselli noticed a disturbing pattern. All similar crimes in their jurisdiction involved attacks on hotel maids, exactly matching how Richard operated. Their investigation led them back to Paula Cupid's unsolved murder at the Abbey Resort.
The net was tightening, but the most damning evidence was yet to come. In September 1976, authorities made a crucial decision. They would exhume Nancy Lossman's body. Those bite marks preserved during her initial autopsy would now be subjected to forensic odontology, a relatively new science at the time that analyzed bite patterns like fingerprints.
4 forensic experts examined the evidence. Their conclusion was unanimous and damning. The bite marks on Nancy Lossman's breast matched Richard's dental records. This was groundbreaking. In the mid-1970s, bite mark analysis was cutting-edge forensic science. One of the few methods available before DNA profiling revolutionized criminal investigations. The unique arrangement, size, and imperfections of Richard's teeth had literally left his signature on his victim's body. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Richard's legal strategy shifted. Rather than fight the mounting charges, he began entering guilty pleas. First, he pleaded guilty to a single SA charge for the Holiday Inn attack, with other charges dropped.
He was committed to Central State Hospital in Walpun as a sex deviant. In August, he pleaded guilty to the attempted murder of Sharon Kulisek, receiving a 50 to 70-year sentence, though oddly, his attorney claimed no deal had been made with prosecutors.
Then on December 24, 1976, the announcement came. Richard would stand trial for Paula Cupid's murder. The trial lasted nearly a month, but the outcome was inevitable. On February 22, 1977, Richard pleaded guilty to murdering Paula. In exchange, additional charges of SA and mayhem were dropped. He received a life sentence to be served concurrently with his Wisconsin convictions. But prosecutors weren't finished. In April, he was extradited to Illinois to face charges for the murders of Nancy and Lisa Lossman. He initially pleaded not guilty, but there was a problem. Sometime after the murders, he had all his teeth removed, perhaps hoping to destroy the very evidence that connected him to the crimes. Undeterred, specialists took x-rays of his mouth and created plaster models of his gums, comparing them to the bite marks on Nancy's body. The science held up. In November, facing inescapable evidence, he changed his plea. In exchange for admitting to Nancy's murder, all charges related to 3-year-old Lisa's death were dropped.
He was sentenced to 200 to 400 years in prison.
Richard Macek, the mad biter, would never walk free again. He would die behind bars with at least 3 confirmed murders, 1 attempted murder, and multiple sexual assaults to his name. The bite marks, his signature of dominance and brutality, had become his downfall. But his story doesn't end with his convictions. In fact, the most controversial chapter was yet to be written. Shortly after Richard's conviction for Sharon Kulisak's attempted murder, Dr. Lowell Levine, one of the forensic experts who'd helped build the case against Richard, made a startling claim. He believed Richard might be responsible for another murder, one for which someone else was already serving time. On September 12, 1972, 14-year-old Sally Candell left her home in Carroll Stream, Illinois for a bike ride, promising to return by 7 o'clock to help with dishes. She never made it home.
The next morning at 5:50, a sheriff's deputy found her lifeless body lying between rows of corn in a muddy field, just 2 miles from her house. Her bicycle lay nearby on a gravel road, its front wheel bent. Sally had been beaten to death with horrific brutality. She suffered 22 lacerations to her head from a 16-inch grocery cart handle found near the scene. Her skull was fractured, and a deep gash split the back of her head. A 14-inch tear ran down her jeans, and on her inner right thigh was a jagged bite mark that had broken the skin, made just after her death. Part of her thumb had been cut off, and her eyelids had been slashed. Police arrested a local man named Richard Malone when they discovered he'd once kept a shopping cart handle in his car for protection, the same type used to kill Sally. Several dentists testified that the bite mark matched Malone's teeth. He was convicted and sentenced to 80 to 175 years in prison.
Malone maintained his innocence from day one, and Dr. Levine agreed with him. Using advances in dental forensic technology, Levine examined the bite marks again in 1986 and concluded they actually matched Richard Macek, not Richard Malone. 3 other forensic experts disputed this finding, insisting Malone was the killer. Prosecutors involved in the original case also contested Levine's conclusions. The debate became heated, with enormous implications. Had an innocent man spent years in prison while the real killer remained free to murder others? Almost immediately after Macek's conviction for the Lossman murders, reports surfaced that he'd supposedly sent a letter to Malone's parents confessing to Sally Candell's murder. But the existence of this letter was never confirmed, and Macek never admitted to the crime. In 1982, after additional review boards examined the new forensic evidence, Richard Malone petitioned the governor for clemency. He was finally released after spending more than 20 years behind bars for a crime he may not have committed. Sally Candell's true killer was never definitively identified. Richard Macek died without ever being charged with her murder.
And Sally Candell wasn't the only potential victim whose case remains shrouded in uncertainty.
The McHenry County Sheriff announced that Richard was also considered a suspect in the 1975 death of Cindy Becker, a McHenry woman whose body was found in Nippersink Creek near Spring Grove. Richard had been her neighbor at one time, but insufficient evidence meant he was never charged. One article claimed investigators had examined Richard for at least 9 murders total. According to this report, Richard confessed to a psychiatrist about murdering 18-year-old Michelle Baker, found drowned in a McHenry Creek on July 4, 1975. Again, no charges were ever filed. He was even briefly considered as a possible suspect in the 1968 sexually motivated murder of university student Christine Rothschild at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. How many victims did Richard really claim? We'll likely never know the full truth. After his convictions, several people involved in the cases gave interviews, expressing a shared belief that Richard could never be rehabilitated. Yet curiously, he appeared willing to cooperate with doctors who wanted to study him, to understand what had driven him to commit such horrors. During his incarceration at Central State Hospital in Wrongful, Richard lived in what was described as relative comfort, almost luxury by prison standards.
He had his own room filled with furniture and recreational activities. He worked as a chef in the kitchen. He even applied for Social Security benefits. For a man who'd brutally murdered at least 3 people, including a 3-year-old child, his conditions seemed remarkably lenient. But this arrangement wouldn't last forever.
On March 2, 1987, while incarcerated at Dodge Correctional Institution, a guard made a grim discovery during early morning rounds. Richard Macek was hanging in his cell, shoestrings tied around his neck and attached to an air vent. Warden Gordon Aberson tried desperately to resuscitate him and rushed Richard to Wrongful Memorial Hospital. But it was too late. Richard was pronounced dead. He was 39 years old. His death was ruled a self-unaliving. The mad biter had taken his own life, escaping any further justice for the crimes he may have committed, but was never charged with. The news was met with relief from investigators and victims, families. Detective George Hendel, one of the investigators who'd worked tirelessly to bring Richard to justice, stated bluntly in an interview that he had no sympathy for the killer and wished he'd been sentenced to death instead. Richard Macek's story raises profound and disturbing questions that continue to resonate today.
The bite mark evidence that helped convict him was groundbreaking in the 1970s, a powerful forensic tool that seemed to offer definitive proof of guilt. But as the Sally Candle case demonstrates, bite mark analysis is far from infallible. Courts are now much more skeptical about admitting this type of evidence, requiring greater certainty and corroboration. Organizations like the Innocence Project work tirelessly to re-examine cases where questionable forensic science, including bite mark analysis, led to convictions. Richard Malone's case stands as a stark reminder that even evidence presented as scientific can be wrong, and the consequences of those errors are devastating.
Did an innocent man spend 2 decades in prison while Richard Macek continued killing? The evidence suggests this may have been exactly what happened. Yet we must also remember the confirmed victims and their families. Paula Atkinson Cupid, just 24 years old, murdered while simply doing her job. Nancy Lossman, 27, and her 3-year-old daughter Lisa, killed in their own home. Sharon Lee Kulisek, whose extraordinary courage and quick thinking finally stopped a serial killer. These weren't just statistics or case files. They were real people with families, dreams, and futures that were violently stolen from them. Richard's estimated net worth at the time of his death in 1987 was negligible. He died a prisoner with no significant assets or estate.
The mad biter's legacy is one of brutality, unanswered questions, and a cautionary tale about the limits of forensic science. His crimes demonstrated the darkest capabilities of human nature, the capacity for violence, the absence of empathy, and the terrifying ease with which monsters can hide in plain sight.
As of 2025, advances in DNA technology and forensic analysis have revolutionized criminal investigations, making it far less likely that someone like Richard Macek could evade justice for as long as he did. Yet his story reminds us that even with all our scientific progress, some questions may never be answered, and some wounds may never fully heal.
The families of Sally Candle, Cindy Becker, Mikkel Baker, and other potential victims still live with uncertainty, the agonizing possibility that they'll never know for certain who took their loved ones from them.
Richard Otto Macek was born in 1948 in Chicago, Illinois.
He was married and had children, though details about his personal life remain scarce.
He died by self-unaliving on March 2, 1987, taking his secrets to the grave.
The mad biter is gone, but the scars he left behind on his victims, their families, and the justice system itself remain as a chilling reminder of the monsters that walk among us.